So, welcome to the American Shoulder and Elbow Surgeons Podcast. I'm your co host, Brian Waterman, a sports and shoulder elbow surgeon at Wake Forest University in association with Atrium Health. I'm fortunate to have Peter Chalmers, a shoulder elbow surgeon at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, as my co host. Before we get started, I should mention that the views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the ASES, the University of Utah, Wake Forest University, or any of the institutions of our guests. With that formality out of the way, it gives me great pleasure to welcome two great guests today that really need no introduction. They are players within the ASES as well as the community at large. Dr. Ben Ma is our first guest, and he hails from the University of California, San Francisco, where he's been recently appointed as chair of the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery and as professor in residence of sports medicine and shoulder surgery. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Our second guest, not to be outdone, is Oke Anakwenze. He's the head of shoulder surgery and professor in orthopedic surgery at Duke University. Oke, welcome to you as well.
Thank you so much, Brian. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, you know, the pleasure of doing these podcasts is that we really get to dive in on topics that I think deserve probably greater area of focus. And there's a much needed discussion we need to have about the topic of business and business management in orthopedic surgery. Increasingly, we're seeing the influence of financial pressures and certainly a lot of business decisions on our actual clinical practice of medicine. One of 20 orthopedic physician executives is a shoulder elbow surgeon. 1 in 5 is a sports surgeon. So we've definitely seen an uptick in the way that we interface with administrators in our departments and offices. As surgeons, Ben, what is the impetus for pursuing outside business management opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's really about learning the lingo and also understanding what the drivers are in terms of how to make decisions. Because as physicians, we always focus about how to deliver the best clinical care. But the business aspect, we actually don't really pay too much attention to. So having the right knowledge and also understanding what the lingo and what they're actually focusing on is very helpful when you actually get a seat at the table. Yeah.
Okay, for you, what drives you towards pursuing those opportunities? Just for reference, you did an MBA, an executive MBA, 4 years into practice. What was the goal behind that?
Well, yeah, thanks. I think it's it's as these things go, it's usually personal. It's always a sacrifice to go back to school and accumulate those loans and the pressures of studying again and all that stuff. For me, it was at that time it was a realization that I wanted to be. I needed to be a better leader. I had my own practice, and I was always interested in business. I thought about going to get an MBA while I was in medical school, but I couldn't verbalize why at that time. When I came out into practice, I realized that I had to be a better manager of people, and also a better sort of strategic thinker. And finally, I wanted to be connected to the entrepreneurship aspect of healthcare. And I felt like I was more of an ideas person, creative, but not understanding, what is value, what are the levers and things like that. So I wanted to be a better leader. I wanted to improve my network. I wanted to be a better manager. And to learn, and I think it's helped really for me anyway, personally, in ways beyond business, even in research and things like that.
Yeah, and I love both of your responses. I think they help to pick up on a couple common themes that we'll probably continue to flush out in the course of this next, 25 or 30 minutes or so. Maybe if we can, for those that are less sophisticated with all the options available, let's kind of lay out the menu of business opportunities that you can pursue. We all know that there's a kind of a traditional MBA track, and many individuals do that within the confines of business. But then we've certainly seen a surge in these executive MBA programs, those that are more specialized executive MBA programs, such as those that focus on healthcare. We've got a Master's of Health Administration. You've got a number of certificate programs or kind of a la carte educational offerings, such as those provided through Kellogg School or Wharton or any number of these other great schools. Maybe let's stick with you. What are the merits and relative benefits of these for the budding physician executive, those individuals that want to deepen their pockets in some of these areas you just mentioned?
Well, when I was a medical student, I went to Mayo and I had a lot of good mentors. And one thing they always said was, especially academic medicine is about three facets, clinical care, research, and education. So those were the three facets I really spent my entire sort of residency and fellowship focusing on, surgery, teaching, research. Times have changed, and over time, I sort of feel like now, in my opinion, at least, there are five facets. It's those three, but includes leadership and business. Healthcare is in a bit of a crisis when it comes to finances. Most hospitals are in the red. We're trying to transition out of the hospital system to ASCs, insurance issues, what have you. It's a field that will always be in service, but I think it's a time for more efficiency. So I think that, if you're in private practice or a hospital like a hospital-based system, I think that it affords you, if you want to stay in healthcare, it affords you the ability to sort of understand the levers that create potentially a successful clinical enterprise, understanding the middle managers, the people at top. A lot of the things are simple from an MBA standpoint, but I think that it affords you to get a deeper understanding, to communicate more clearly, to propose strategies based on practical solutions, as opposed to potentially, sometimes in academics, it's strategies are not really based on practical finance. So that's what I think. I think it gives you opportunities, it gives you a larger network, and allows you to think about things more strategically and practically.
And Ben, you've taken somewhat of a different path. You've certainly achieved incredible heights now as chair and have had many leadership positions. Maybe speak to where you've cultivated these skill sets and what of these options have you utilized in the past to benefit?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brian. And I think certainly mentorship is extremely important. I'm fortunate to have great mentors over my career to guide me through some of these learnings. Freddie Fu is one of them that really kind of guided me early on in my career. And also like within the UCSF, they have, faculty that actually I look up to and really kind of help me through the process. So that's probably like how you learn on the job. I've done some of these shorter series, for example, the AOA Kellogg series, which used to be very popular maybe about 15 years ago. Those are smaller commitments. Usually go there for like a, longer weekend, like, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There are multiple modules you could go through. You can learn about how to manage conflicts, how to manage a negotiation, kind of skills that you learn. And that kind of helped me to kind of just understand a little bit about what my strengths and weaknesses are. So when as a leader, I think most important to understand what your style and personality is. Then you can actually more effectively kind of work with others over there. And I think that kind of helped me with that process. And I was, kind of tell every members or every person that listens to the podcast, if you haven't done one of those personality tests, do one right away. And be sure read about the comments about what, kind of a person you are, because it's probably pretty accurate to describe, who you are. And you may be surprised with some of the findings, because I did mine and I actually didn't pay attention to it. It was actually my wife that kind of found that report in the trunk of my car, like half a year later, and read the report and say, this is exactly you. While I was saying that, oh, this is nothing. This is just, like trash over here from a course I went to. But she said, this is exactly you. You kind of read, carefully and listen to what is being suggested. So those are really kind of very revealing, activities to help you understand yourself more to be a better leader. Yeah.
I just want to say, which may come up, so one, I 100% agree with the personality assessment. We did that, it was the first thing we did before we started. The second we got, accepted and the different types, as we know. We did a Berkman, which was like a 300 question thing, and it's amazing how accurate this stuff is and how impactful it can be. To understand your own triggers, how you may trigger other people, how you may come across, how other people might perceive you. So I found that to be incredibly helpful. And also, being in business school, one thing that was helpful for me is they're all at your level, especially in an executive MBA level. They're all CEOs and they have their own company. So they're going to call you out. And I felt like I needed that. We have it's called a mini board, 6 months with the same group, working projects. And you have these interactions, these charge interactions, and everyone's in different fields. And, it was incredibly helpful for me to know how I might be getting perceived by other people in a way that wasn't getting communicated to me eloquently in healthcare. And finally, mentorship is so important, and Ben is right. And, you definitely don't need an MBA. Ben knows probably everything I know. You have to just have the ability and find a way to get that knowledge. I think you definitely need the knowledge. I don't know that it's only from an MBA, but you have to find a way to get this knowledge, is my opinion.
And both of you have certainly enjoyed the opportunity to learn from incredible and very masterful leaders. Ben, you mentioned Freddie Fu, which is the expert tactician of the nth degree, and just what a fantastic way that he cultivated the PIT system from the ground up. And then OKU with Bill Levine, just very masterful with people, with interacting, with conveying dignity. And I would submit to you that, nobody is self-made, and that a lot of these skill sets, while inherent to us, can be cultivated through some of these personal inventories. Those are decidedly honest appraisals of you. And so, what is maybe something you've learned from some of the 360 evals that you've done, either past or present, and how has that guided your leadership style?
Well, I think that in the past, for example, I give very direct feedback. I'm very direct, but I don't like getting direct feedback. I don't like, but that's, part of that is thinking, I give things that I can't take. Meeting people where they are. I was very, very rigid, like my Berkman, these bar graphs, the range of personality, like mine were very narrow all across the board, like extremely narrow. And that's someone who doesn't compromise very well, someone who definitely thinks his way is the right way, someone who is not afraid to give you criticism, but doesn't like to get criticized. And there are many more exampps. And, the truth of the matter is some of these things, good mentors like Bill Levine already were sort of, working through with me. But at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility for your own life and, fly, spread your wings, as they say. But those are some examples. And those are things that to this day, I work on and I think about when I interact with people, just to not fall into those traps.
Hey, Brian, I would add also one that, very common personality for surgeons, which is very common with my analysis, is quick to judge. So when I get my personality evaluations, are always very, very, I'm quick to judge, very, very perceptive. Again, doesn't listen very well, right? And I kind of learned my lesson early on, when I was kind of in a leadership role, how I lead my group, because every time when there's a problem, when there's an issue, I already made up my mind. So, kind of my mind's made. And when members tell me things, I just kind of, don't really listen as much. And after kind of going through that process, learning about some of the personalities I have, and also listening to my wife telling me that how accurate those are over there, that I tend to listen more right now. So, at meetings right now, I tend to be the last person to give, my opinion, kind of listening what other people's thoughts are. Even though I may have an opinion in mind, I actually want to make myself listen, and hopefully actually have a better, kind of a conclusion at the end. I think those are things that, how these training could, make you make you a better leader. Just recognizing what your personality traits are, and work with it, because you're not going to change it. We're not going to change who we are as surgeon. We're not going to change it. We actually, can, give criticism, but can't take it very well because we are certain people to be good at our field. But, understanding some of those differences will make you, probably more effective moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that keys in on some really key concepts. The interpersonal management. How you empower leadership and lead from the front, as well as peer-to-peer leadership. Kind of some of the distributorship model. Maybe can we talk, Ben, a little bit more about what is the added value in an academic setting? I think many of us, myself, yourself, are in academic institutions and sometimes feel a sense of powerlessness in guiding the business strategy and the operational side of a very large health system. One of my colleagues says it's like steering an aircraft carrier. Talk about how this may add a business curriculum of some variety, may have value in the academic setting.
Yeah, I think you kind of, bring up some of the main issue, right? As an academic institution, a lot of times we kind of don't react as quickly, and also don't make decision as effectively as other entities. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Bad means you make decisions slow, you kind of miss the boat. Sometimes good means that you not rational about, not very kind of quick to make decisions, make the wrong decisions over there. But as an academician, that's even more important to actually learn some of these skills and then have the business acumen, because there's not a lot of people actually, in those roles in academic, medicine. Various, when you go into a private organization, or more like, a business, oriented group, there are more people interested in those areas. So, for academic department, it's even more important to actually have, people with a skill set to help guide the group go in the right direction. And as most of us know too, as healthcare has changed a bit over the years, and most academic institutions even have, very, very business, focus. I have CEOs actually have different, interests, and different kind of vision, for the program. So we need to be the voice for the academician to kind of really preserve our identity, not just be another, big hospital system that do a lot of surgeries or deliver clinical care. But why are we here as people that actually want to focus on research, education for the new generation? Because if not, our voice would be lost. I think it's going to be extremely important that we actually do that. Yeah.
And okay, you've got a background in private practice. I think there's incredible value there for a business acumen, and I think with the growing presence of private equity, when you talk about consolidation of practice groups, is a business background even more relevant now in the contemporary practice environment?
Oh, 100%. I think a business background is helpful in any environment. The mission will be different in different environments, but there will be certain things that will cut across. Obviously private equity is a big thing now. An MBA, at least the training or business training in general, may allow me to look at that a certain way. The anxiety is a lot less. I fully understand. I've read and studied, what private equities are looking for, understand how they value things, understand, what kind of multiples they're looking for, what's the typical, exit time frame they're looking at, what do they consider a good opportunity versus a bad opportunity. And normally these are more private practice things, I want to build a surgery center and we want to maximize revenue and throughput. But the academic centers are changing. They have to. It's becoming more competitive. You can't just say, I'm Duke, so, everyone's going to come. You have to understand the markets, how to get into different markets, what's a profitable market versus not. The mission is always on patients. But you also have to understand how to keep your enterprise profitable and successful. And even in things like the mission being research, which is why I left private practice to come to academics, was because I cared more about the academics than I did about the business of medicine. I care more about research and teaching and complex surgeries than just making money. But even if it's convincing people to do the right research or to mentor or to volunteer times in the underserved communities, whatever it is, these things take a bit of organizational behavior training. How do you frame your arguments? How do you meet people where they are? What is a convert communicator? How do you get the right people on your side? And doing it in an honest way. So I think, in academics, I think it's very useful. I think it will become more useful as we go forward. I think the leaders should have business sort of training so that we don't have a lot of other administrators sort of coming in and sort of telling us how we should run our own practices. So I think it can be valuable in any setting.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on a couple of things that you alluded to. And I really want to kind of dive in on how involved you are on a granular level within your departments and organizations as it relates to some of these things. Ben, San Francisco is a very competitive market, and there's a lot of forces, both academic, private, hospital-owned in your area. How involved are you in discussions on growth, strategy, outreach? I think we're all accustomed to a grassroots campaign with individual websites and everything, but tying this in with a broader strategy and interfacing with your marketing folks and your C-suite individuals, maybe walk us through what that looks like for you at UCSF and how you are gainfully involved in that conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that we are very involved, and it started with my previous chair. Ted Vail actually came from Duke to join us 16 years ago. Ted came, and one of the things that kind of separated us as a department is that we actually were able to, build a surgery center, and we call it like the Orthopaedic Institute, where we have clinic and OR capacity. And what it does actually give us some financial independence from the rest of the health system. It means that there's some, gain sharing that comes to the departments that allow us to be successful and able to kind of support some of our academic mission. And throughout that, joint venture with the, hospital, we're able to kind of really creatively kind of look at where we actually strategically build growth across the Bay Area. That's something I was, kind of helping him when I was in a different role as a vice chair for adult operation in terms of where the opportunities are for growth. So we as a specialty has been working with the health system closely in terms of where the opportunities are and what the direction is. So as chair right now, I think that's eminently involved because as orthopedic surgeon, we are kind of the darlings of the health system, right? We bring a lot of business into the system, use a lot of resources. And most of the time, our patients are, very well, paying patients that the hospital likes. So I think that, we are at the table most of the time in terms of discuss about where the opportunities are, where the resources we need to kind of move to. Since being chair right now, there are a lot of discussion even about where the resources should be allocated. I think that's one thing that's different with my role now is like when there's, money need to be invested, when do we actually get another proton beam therapy, a unit which costs millions and millions of dollars, but that potentially will drive business to the hospital will help the cancer surgeon, help the orthopedic cancer surgeon, and maybe, kind of raise the prestige even more to bring, more patients to the health system. So those are decisions that you're involved in. So I think that those are opportunities that, if you have the right lingo, understanding the finances well, and opportunities, then you can actually be part of the group to make decisions, to kind of, change the direction moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe stick with this for a minute. In your role as vice chair of operations, did you help to design or inform those policies? Were those already kind of pre-existing walk me through what it looks like to initiate some of those fairly bold interventions in a UC system, which is tough.
Yeah, we are pretty slow moving as a system, part of a University of California health system. But when I was in the chair of adult operation, one of the things that we did was, there may be some concept or idea that the health system want to do, or from the department, and as vice chair, for me, is really about executing. What are the opportunities that we can make it, work? One of the things we actually made a decision during COVID is actually move some of our inpatient elective surgeries away from the main hospital. The reason why is because the main hospital is pretty congested. And because of COVID, we were able to kind of reopen one of the hospitals. And we as a department took advantage of it. Well, we will move, but when we move, we actually want particular resources to help us. And for me, it's really about, creating the right opportunity to allow the department to be successful. So that was a pretty, kind of a big decision, for the health system to make that, choice during COVID. But we actually benefit quite a bit as a department because we become more efficient. We actually move to a hospital that we actually have, control of most of the OR and also the hospital resources. And what it does actually open up resources in the main hospital, allow other services to grow also. So it helps both sides. So I would say that, I would actually tell people to listening to is even though that you may be a staff, physician or faculty members, or maybe some leadership role, you are involved in every part of it. Because when decisions are made, how to make it work, everybody needs to be part of that solution. So don't, just step back and say, let people run it for you, because you are actually part of the solution and also decision making also. Yeah.
Sage-like words of wisdom. Okay. What about you? How have you been involved in dictating policy there at Duke? I know you guys have recently been undergoing a transition to several ASCs, and have you been able to influence that policy? And if not, maybe we could talk a little bit about, vendor contracts and individual preferences versus trying to contain costs and trying to keep the shelves relatively limited on stock.
It's a great question. And, obviously, my role at Duke is certainly less important than Ben's role at UCSF. So I'm not going to sit here and sort of try to follow him. But I'd say that one thing Ben said that needs to be said, and something that I probably should have known when I came out, but I didn't, that everyone is a leader. When I came out, I sort of thought, well, a leader is the person with a title. And this is why, when I came out, I was like, oh, well, everyone needs to lead. Within Duke, my role coming in was to sort of try to help build the shoulder program, which was already very, very strong with a lot of great surgeons, Ryan Garagos and Higgins, et cetera, of the past. But just to try to help galvanize it, put it together. And, even in that setting, I think the business background really helped out in terms of creating long-term vision. What is our long-term vision? That was 5 years ago. Let's build our academic portfolio. Let's, try to start having some joint conferences. These are little things, but these things build culture. And culture is so important. They say in the business, culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is true. Before you think about your strategy, think about your culture. So that's getting people on the same team. Then, we've had this big integration. Cost containment is now a thing. We've, negotiated our shoulder contracts with the vendors. We've gone to a bit of a 3-vendor system. Similar thing potentially with UCSF, profit sharing, saving program. We've been able to save over $1 million in the last year alone. The profit, and we get a piece of that, not for personal, but for academic endeavors, research, education, things like that. But being able to negotiate that, just, it's simple stuff, but just understanding, and this is entrepreneurship. If you're talking to Tournier, what matters to Tournier, having a sense of the cost of goods, having a sense of their margin, understanding, their volume within the system and how that influences how we negotiate with them. Part of the healthcare system's goal now is to increase the footprint of orthopedics. so that we compete more effectively against you, Brian. But with that said, it's, we have to identify areas, footprints that we think we can add more volume. We just hired a new shoulder surgeon. He actually is a current fellow in Utah. And, part of my job for him is to put him in a position where he can be successful and have a practice. So he wins, Duke wins. But part of that is just understanding some of simple business things, work with other people though, who help out. And then, ASC transition, I was a CEO of an ASC in California, an outpatient joint replacement center, for a while. And, that was part of the reason why I got the MBA, was to learn how to do that better. But it's allowed me to at least voice some opinions based upon some sort of data about how I think we should consider transitioning. With shoulder arthroplasty, what kind of companies do we look for in the ASC center? Even as we build new ASCs, little things, like understanding that Medicare, they need a certain number of cases done before you get approved. And, by the time you finish your contracting for the ASC, you have to think about your marketing. And before you even open, you have to already have a certain number of patients sort of on board, things like that. So, my role at Duke has been, honestly, it's been very much on the shoulder side, growing more generally, not nearly as robust as Ben's role at UCSF, but, for whatever it's worth, I think it's been very helpful to, and most importantly, by far, is to help me build a culture that we can grow from, and I think that's the most important thing, was building a culture. And I think building a good culture is not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, okay, I would comment that don't belittle what you're doing over there, and there's no job is small, and no job is too big over there. And for the audience that listening to us, it's really about getting involved. And I think that if you kind of shut yourself, say, oh, this is business, this is finance, I don't need to be involved in it, then you're really missing opportunities. I think, you have to be at the table, listening to what people are saying, figure out what are, the things that you could help to improve on, because we are the one that's really kind of taking care of the patients. We are the one that can make decision on what's going to help us, but we're actually not there making decisions. Someone's going to make the decision for you, and most of the time it may not be the best. So having a seat at the table, we're able to kind of contribute. That's very, very important. Yeah.
Ben, what are additional resources that you lean on today to guide your business decisions? You've obviously got a great background, but I'm wondering, is that books? Is that interactions with other people? Is that the Harvard Business Journal? Talk me through how you're making some of these informed decisions in your current capacity.
Yeah, I'm still learning on the job, so maybe in a few years I could give you an even better answer. But I think we are sometimes so focused on healthcare alone because we are physicians, right? We're good at what we do, and that's what we focus on. Having friends or colleagues or other folks actually in different sector and kind of talking with them about what the stresses are, what the drivers are, would be very, very helpful. Being in the Bay Area, I have a lot of colleagues or patients actually in different sector, for example, the tech area or the venture capital area, and just even like interacting with them, understanding what are they thinking about healthcare, what are they thinking about their area, will help you guide you in terms of a better business decision. Because sometimes we actually put up blinders on, all we focus about hospital growth, patient growth, but sometimes it's not about growth, it's about what patients need, and understanding what the people, the lay public, what their needs are, what they are looking for, in terms of healthcare, will kind of guide you a bit. So my suggestions is really about broadening your scope, not just focus on your own area, but really listen to what the other people are doing or thinking. That would be really helpful with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're talking about creating value, which I think is important as we consider this, loading the trucks. Certainly making sure we're good stewards of quality is key. Okay, what additional resources might you recommend? And if I could maybe put an additional spin on it, what's the role of an executive coach for ongoing development in your leadership journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I think an executive coach can be extremely helpful. We have the wrong attitude when it comes to some of these things. We will say, well, an executive coach means that I have a problem. An executive coach can really help with strategy. They can help with relationships with colleagues. They can help, and a lot of these executive coaches in healthcare, some of them have been in healthcare leadership, so they know the issue that you might be facing. I've had an executive healthcare coach, which was extremely helpful and one that I sought out myself. Critically, I mean, just having someone who understands to talk through some of these things with, because ultimately, as a leader, you're making decisions that affect other people's lives, not their lives, the children's lives, their spouses' lives, the parents. And you want to try to make the best decision you can, and you can't be too proud to ask for help. Now, on a personal level, I listen maybe a little less these days, but I listen to a lot of leadership podcasts, read a lot of leadership books. I try to keep my mind open to other things, technology that can help healthcare, informatics. But I think of all those things, for me, I gravitate towards some leadership podcasts here and there, but not focused on healthcare specifically, just in general.
Yeah, both of you alluded to that, gleaning lessons learned from other areas, tech, business, the corporate world. I think there's a lot to be gained from that. Maybe as we continue to wrap this up, Ben, in your day number of chairmanship, where are we at?
We're day probably 90 something right now. So yeah.
All right. So double digits. What's the biggest challenge you face from a business perspective, and how do you work within your department to address this?
Good question over there. From a business standpoint, I think that the biggest challenge is to understand the scope of the department right now. And I think that it sounds silly. Oh, you meet with your finance, officer, and kind of figure out what the books are. But the scope is not just the salary, the compensation, what the revenues, but things like pay and makes, things like how you allocate your resources. For example, resources in the clinic, resources in terms of how much help each individual get. Those are actually different business entities over there you need to kind of pay attention to. So little things like that. How do you really get a handle of balancing out? What's the right balance for each practice to allow them to be successful? That's something I'm still learning about over there. Same thing with the operating room. When do we open another room? When do we just staff another, OR to go later or open, on a different day? Those are the business decisions we have to kind of figure out. And each area have different way of calculating it. And just because someone has really, really good about, calculating these resources, it may not be, applicable to how you use it at your center. So some of these decisions you have to kind of, take it with a grain of salt and just understanding what the needs are and build on them. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge I learned right now from that, from the business standpoint. But it's exciting. I think there's a new, hopefully, skill or tools I actually may acquire. But that's something that's constantly we have to kind of get better at. Yeah.
Well, it's good to know that I have you on speed dial so I can lean on your expertise. This is great. Certainly a wealth of knowledge. Okay, any parting words of wisdom that you have to our listeners?
No, I think, I'm honored to be here. I think for whomever, especially the younger generation, I think that healthcare is changing. I think you have to focus on yourself as well, keeping your mind healthy, burnout is a real thing. I think learning and having a mindset of learning and growth, however that is in business, whatever, can only help you in ways you may or may not know. And I think most importantly, understand that everyone is a leader, and I think you owe it to yourself to try to be the best leader you can be. You don't have to go to school for that, but I think at least thinking about it, finding good mentors like Ben and others can be greatly important. But yeah, that's it. Appreciate the time here with you guys.
And I put a plug in for, a great leadership think tank in the Fagan Leadership Forum. You're involved in that, and I've certainly benefited incredibly from that, and lessons from Coach K and Fortune 500 companies. So definitely a quick plug for that. We had Dean Taylor on a few weeks ago, and that episode will be forthcoming. But he alluded to the importance of that and edifying his career. So just another kind of common theme that I think we see come up time and again.
Yeah, it's a great program.
Yeah, I heard great things about it. And again, it's about having the right connection, connecting people, and to learn from each other. I think that's, important over there, because sometimes people from a different sector would listen to what your problems are and say, oh, wow, you could treat it like this, and actually almost like, kind of open up, something that, oh, wow, why didn't I think about that over there? So having the right colleagues and actually others who have be a good sounding board for you as a leader is important, because sometimes you get so, kind of honed into your decision making, you forget about there may be the other ways to do it, and other folks may be able to see it much more clear than you are. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Truly fantastic words of wisdom. And I'm so honored to have both of you as friends and colleagues. And I really look forward to the great things you have on the horizon.
Thank you.
That's about all the time we have for the podcast today. Thanks so much to you both. For all our shoulder and elbow listeners out there, don't forget to subscribe. And for Peter Chalmers, I'm Brian Waterman. We'll see you next time.